There's a moment in life when the world doesn't wait. It doesn't pause for indecision, for hesitation, for the polite circumspection that most people wear, like armor. It moves with the relentless precision of time itself, and those who hesitate, even for a second, often watch opportunity dissolve like mist in the morning sun. You might think ruthlessness is about aggression, about stepping on people to get ahead. You might think it's about winning at any cost, about a cold disregard for others' feelings. That is not what I mean. True ruthlessness, the kind that elevates you without diminishing others, is quiet, controlled, and unapologetically precise. It's about making decisions and taking action when most people are frozen by doubt. It's about clarity of purpose that does not excuse cruelty but does demand discipline. And it's about moving through the world with a presence so deliberate that hesitation feels like a luxury you cannot afford. Imagine standing at the edge of a decision that could define your next decade. Most people linger, they weigh and second guess. They ask themselves, what if I fail? What if I offend? What if I make the wrong choice? And in that hesitation, the world moves past them. They stay where they are. You, however, step forward. Not impulsively, not carelessly. You step with awareness, with understanding, with a quiet acknowledgement that action, calculated, deliberate action, is a far more valuable currency than comfort or approval. Ruthlessness begins in the mind. It is a decision to refuse paralysis. It is choosing consciously to prioritize results over excuses. It is the ability to let go of what does not serve your purpose without unnecessary guilt. This does not mean you ignore ethics. It does not mean you abandon respect. On the contrary, the ruthless mind understands that discipline and integrity are inseparable from effectiveness. One without the other is weakness. Here's the paradox: the more unapologetically ruthless you become in pursuing your objectives, the more ethical and aligned you must remain. Every action is measured, every decision weighed, every consequence considered. You become ruthless not in chaos but in clarity. You understand human behavior, patterns, and probabilities, not to manipulate but to communicate effectively and influence responsibly. You recognize that relationships, trust, might, and collaboration are not optional. They are the channels through which true impact flows. Think about the people you admire, those whose results stand out in business, in art, in life. They rarely achieve greatness by waiting for approval. They do not apologize for prioritizing their vision. They make hard choices, often in solitude, and they carry the weight of those choices with poise. They are decisive, even when the stakes are high, because they have cultivated the mental muscles to act deliberately under pressure. That is the essence of unapologetic ruthlessness. It is not cruelty. It is courage applied with precision. Let's consider the mechanics for a moment. Ruthlessness is rooted in three foundational principles: awareness, accountability, and disciplined action. An awareness allows you to perceive the truth of a situation without distortion. It allows you to see your options clearly, to anticipate consequences realistically, and to discern what truly matters versus what is noise. Accountability forces you to own every decision, every outcome, and every deviation from your principles. Disciplined action translates clarity into movement, ensuring that insight becomes impact. Together, these three pillars form the architecture of effectiveness, of power, of influence, without resorting to shortcuts that compromise ethics or integrity. Now, a subtle but essential distinction: ruthlessness is not about forcing outcomes. It is about prioritizing intelligently, acting decisively, and relinquishing the attachment to how others perceive you. The moment you let approval dictate your actions, and you dilute your effectiveness. The moment you cling to comfort or convention, you forfeit potential. Being unapologetically ruthless is not about being liked. It is about being resolute, It is about becoming someone whose presence alone signals clarity, someone whose decisions carry weight because they are grounded in principle, not popularity. Here's a practical illustration. Imagine a project at work, a high-stakes initiative where resources are limited, opinions are many, and the timeline is unforgiving. Most people will hesitate. They will hold meetings, draft memos, seek consensus, and in the process, dissipate momentum. A ruthless approach, applied ethically, would involve clear analysis, prioritizing the highest leverage actions, making the necessary decisions decisively, and communicating them clearly to the team. No drama, no ego, just purpose-driven execution. In that moment, ruthlessness is not cruelty, it is leadership, it is influence, it is impact. The same principle applies to personal growth. Most people drift through life, swayed by habit, societal expectation, and fear of judgment. They compromise on their time, their energy, their focus, because it feels easier to blend in than to stand firm. Unapologetic ruthlessness challenges that inertia. It asks you to examine every choice. Does this move me closer to my objectives, or does it serve convenience? Am I investing in relationships, skills, and opportunities that matter, or am I settling for what is familiar and safe? To act ruthlessly is to answer these questions honestly and then, crucially, to act. And here is the subtle danger most people miss. You can practice ruthlessness superficially without achieving its benefits. You can be aggressive, impatient, or dismissive, mistaking forcefulness for effectiveness. This is not ruthlessness. It is recklessness, thinly veiled as confidence. True ruthlessness is grounded in control. It is emotionally regulated. It is calm, measured, and self-aware. It is strategic clarity without moral compromise. Consider this. Life presents you with countless choices every day. Most are trivial, some are significant. Ruthlessness is knowing which are which, and then allocating your energy, focus, and courage accordingly. It is the quiet refusal to expend effort on distractions, drama, or unproductive obligations. It is the ability to say no, not angrily, but decisively. And it is the ability to prioritize long-term value over short-term comfort. Now you might feel a tension rising in you as you listen. The word ruthless often triggers discomfort because it is associated with aggression, with intimidation, with harm. But I want to reframe that. Unapologetic ruthlessness is not about dominance over others. It is mastery over yourself. It is the courage to act ethically, decisively, and purposefully, even when it is uncomfortable. It is the ability to create conditions for success without compromise, without resentment, without apology. The shift begins internally. It begins with quiet reflection and brutal honesty. Ask yourself, where am I hesitating unnecessarily? Where do I cling to comfort at the expense of progress? Where do I avoid confrontation, not with others, but with reality itself? And the answers will illuminate where ruthlessness is needed, not as aggression, but as resolve. And then comes action. The transition from awareness to execution is where most people falter. They understand what must be done, but they linger in contemplation. True ruthlessness is knowing that understanding without execution is impotent. It is stepping forward decisively, responsibly, ethically. It is taking ownership of outcomes without evasion, without blame, without excuses. In this book, we will explore the methods, the psychology, and the mindset that cultivate unapologetic ruthlessness. We will examine how to combine self-discipline, strategic clarity, and ethical decision-making into a cohesive force that propels results. We will explore the balance between empathy and resolve, between patience and urgency, and between perception and action. By the end, the goal is not to make you cruel, it is to make you capable of making hard decisions, capable of navigating complexity without paralysis, capable of acting with integrity while maximizing impact, capable of being unapologetically yourself, calm, deliberate, and ruthlessly effective. Now consider the first step, awareness. Awareness of your habits, your tendencies, your fears, awareness of the consequences that follow indecision. Awareness of the subtle compromises that erode potential. Awareness is the lens through which ruthlessness begins. Without it, action is blind. With it, every step carries weight. Every choice is intentional. Every moment is leveraged. This is not a call to recklessness. This is a call to clarity. And this is a call to embrace discomfort as a necessary companion to growth. This is a call to be unapologetically precise in your decisions while retaining humanity, ethics, and respect. To be ruthless, in the truest sense, is to be effective. And to be effective is to honor your responsibility to yourself and to those you engage with. So before we begin, I invite you to pause. Take a moment to examine the areas in your life where hesitation, uncertainty, or compromise have limited you. Observe them without judgment, acknowledge them with clarity, and prepare, because the journey ahead will challenge the ease of comfort. It will require courage, discipline, and focus, but it will also illuminate the path to becoming unapologetically ruthless in the most powerful, ethical, and transformative way possible. The choice, as always, lies with you. Hesitate, and the world will continue moving. Act, and you step into the domain of those who shape their lives intentionally. Let us begin the inner architecture of ruthlessness. Ruthlessness, when examined closely, is less about the world outside you and more about the world inside. It is not a set of external behaviors or a checklist of tough moves. It is a mental architecture, a set of habits and structures that allow you to act decisively without apology, ethically without compromise, and effectively without hesitation. To become unapologetically ruthless, you must begin with the self, your mind, your focus, your emotional regulation, and your willingness to confront your own weaknesses. Most people think of ruthlessness as the ability to act aggressively. They imagine someone who is always on offense, constantly pushing, cutting, demanding. That is a surface-level view, and it is misleading. True ruthlessness is strategic. It is calm. It is intentional. It is the capacity to choose what matters most and to allocate energy, time, and attention with precision without wasting force where it does not serve the ultimate objective. The foundation of this inner architecture is clarity of purpose. Clarity of purpose is not a vague ambition. It is a precise understanding of what matters, why it matters, and the sequence of steps most likely to produce results. People who hesitate often lack this clarity. They are swayed by opinion, distracted by trivialities, or immobilized by fear of judgment. Ruthlessness begins with knowing exactly what you are pursuing and why, so that every decision can be evaluated against that objective. To cultivate clarity, you must first examine your life without illusion. This requires honesty, brutal honesty, but controlled and unemotional. Ask yourself, where am I wasting energy? Where am I holding back because of fear, doubt, or social expectation? What are the areas where indecision is quietly eroding my potential? Awareness of these blind spots is the first pillar of ruthlessness. Without awareness, action is reactive, chaotic, and diluted. With awareness, action becomes deliberate, ethical, and impactful. The next layer is emotional regulation. Many people confuse ruthlessness with a lack of emotion, but the opposite is true. Ruthlessness requires mastery over emotion. Anger, frustration, impatience, or envy can cloud judgment, distort priorities, and lead to poor decision-making. And the unapologetically ruthless individual cultivates calm authority. They recognize the presence of emotion, but do not allow it to dictate action. Instead, they use emotion as a signal, information about values, preferences, and boundaries, but always translate it into deliberate action rather than reactive behavior. Consider this. A critical decision arises at work, at home, or in personal growth. The stakes are high, the options are complex, and time is limited. An unregulated mind becomes entangled in what-ifs and emotional turbulence. A ruthlessly trained mind processes the same information differently. It evaluates options with clarity, anticipates probable outcomes, and executes without hesitation. The emotional turbulence is acknowledged, processed, and set aside, not ignored, not suppressed, but transformed into disciplined focus. The third essential component is accountability. Ruthlessness is not about blaming others or external circumstances. It is about owning your choices, your outcomes, and your trajectory. Every action carries consequences, and the unapologetically ruthless individual accepts responsibility for both successes and failures. This level of accountability strengthens decision-making. It removes the comfort of excuses and substitutes a framework of learning and adaptation. The moment you shift from blame to ownership, your power multiplies. Not because you dominate others, but because you control your own influence over outcomes. Closely tied to accountability is decisive action. Awareness and emotional regulation are useless without execution. Ruthlessness is measured in steps taken, decisions implemented, and momentum sustained. Hesitation may feel safe, but it costs far more than bold, measured action. Execution under uncertainty is the domain of the ruthless, but it is always guided by principle, ethics, and clarity of purpose. This is what separates reckless impulsiveness from unapologetic effectiveness. Ruthlessness also demands selective engagement. Not every fight is yours to fight. Not every opportunity deserves your energy. The unapologetically ruthless individual discerns between signal and noise. They prioritize high-leverage actions and relationships that amplify results, while disengaging from what drains energy, time, and focus. This does not mean avoidance of responsibility. It means strategic allocation of effort. It means understanding that influence and impact are finite resources and treating them accordingly. There is a subtle but critical psychological shift required here. You must embrace the discomfort of discernment. Human nature often seeks consensus, comfort, or approval. We hesitate because we fear disapproval, we fear judgment, or we fear conflict. Ruthlessness requires that you weigh these concerns, recognize them, and then act in alignment with purpose rather than reaction. In many cases, discomfort is not a signal to stop, it is a signal that growth is imminent. Discomfort is a natural companion to decisive action. Learning to navigate it ethically and calmly is essential. A practical exercise is helpful at this stage. Begin by identifying a recurring area of indecision or hesitation in your life. It might be a relationship challenge, a career move, or a personal habit you wish to change. Map the situation fully. Identify your objective clearly. Evaluate your options without emotional bias. Predict probable outcomes realistically. Then, execute a decision decisively, observing the results without judgment. Reflect, adjust, and repeat. Over time, this practice develops a neurological pattern of clarity, ownership, and effective action, the very foundation of ruthlessness. Now consider boundary mastery. Many people fail not because of lack of skill or intelligence, but because they fail to assert appropriate boundaries. Ruthlessness requires clear, ethical, and unapologetic boundaries. These are not about domination, they are about clarity. They signal what is acceptable, what is prioritized, and what is outside your scope. Boundaries are communicated with calm authority and consistency. When executed properly, they reduce friction to prevent wasted effort and increase influence without coercion. Another dimension is time mastery. Ruthlessness demands respect for your own time and energy. Every minute is an asset. Every distraction, however small, represents a trade-off. The unapologetically ruthless individual allocates attention deliberately. Meetings, conversations, habits, and commitments are evaluated through the lens of whether they contribute to high-priority objectives. This is not about rigid schedules or obsessive control. It is about conscious allocation of effort and ethical protection of what matters most. A critical psychological insight here is that ruthlessness is identity-driven. It is not a set of actions you perform once, it is a state of being that emerges from how you define yourself. You begin to see yourself as someone who acts decisively, responsibly and ethically. Your identity supports your behavior. When choices arise, the question is no longer, should I act? But which action aligns with who I am and what I value? Identity and action become aligned, and in that alignment, ruthlessness is both natural and unapologetic. Equally important is the power of detachment. To act ruthlessly, you must detach from the need for constant approval or validation. Detachment does not mean indifference. It means prioritizing long-term impact over temporary comfort. It allows you to evaluate options clearly without bias introduced by fear of judgment or social pressure. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is freedom to act responsibly and effectively without unnecessary compromise. Ruthlessness also thrives on pattern recognition. Observing human behavior, understanding tendencies and anticipating probable outcomes are not tools for manipulation. They are tools for ethical influence and preparation. By recognizing patterns, you can allocate your efforts where they matter most. You can prepare for challenges, navigate complexity, and act decisively in high-stakes situations. This insight is a cognitive lever, allowing ruthlessness to operate on both mental and practical planes. Finally, understand that ruthlessness is incremental. It is cultivated over time through repeated practice of clarity, emotional regulation, accountability, and execution. It is not a sudden transformation. Small, consistent actions build the neural pathways, the habits, and the confidence required to act decisively without apology. Every choice, every reflection, as every execution strengthens the architecture of ruthlessness. By the end of this section, you should begin to see ruthlessness not as a weapon, but as a structure. It is an inner system that organizes your mind, your focus, your decisions, and your actions. It allows you to navigate the world with calm authority, strategic clarity, and ethical precision. It is the mental framework that makes decisive action natural, discomfort tolerable, and impact inevitable. In practice, you will start noticing subtle shifts. Decisions that once paralyzed you become clear. Your energy is directed toward high-leverage tasks. Emotional turbulence becomes manageable. You act without apology, not because you disregard others, but because you respect your own priorities and responsibilities. You communicate clearly, execute decisively, and measure outcomes objectively. This is the core of unapologetic ruthlessness, a blend of mental clarity, ethical accountability, emotional regulation, and decisive execution. Everything else, external results, perception, recognition, is secondary. By cultivating this internal architecture, you set the stage for every other layer of ruthlessness we will explore in the sections to come. Remember this: ruthlessness is not a badge, it is a practice. It is not about domination, it is about mastery. Mastery of self, mastery of focus, mastery of action. When applied consistently and ethically, it transforms indecision into clarity, hesitation into movement, and potential into results. It is calm, controlled, and unapologetically effective. This is where we begin the journey, with the mind, the inner architecture, and the disciplined cultivation of clarity, control, and action. From here, every step, every principle, and every method builds on this foundation, gradually expanding the scope of your influence and the depth of your capability. Decisive action in an uncertain world. Ruthlessness at its core is meaningless without action. Awareness, clarity, and emotional control form the foundation, but they remain theoretical until you move. Decisive action is the bridge between insight and impact. It is where preparation meets execution, where probability transforms into reality, and where the unapologetically ruthless separate themselves from those who hesitate. The first truth about decisive action is that it rarely emerges from comfort. Most people wait for certainty, for conditions to align perfectly, for risks to vanish. They are paralyzed by the illusion of control. The unapologetically ruthless understand that certainty is a myth. Life is probabilistic. Outcomes are never guaranteed. What matters is preparation, analysis, and the courage to act despite uncertainty. Action itself is a form of intelligence. It generates data, reveals patterns, and creates opportunities that passive observation cannot. Consider the psychology of hesitation. It often stems from fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of loss. And these fears are natural. They serve as signals that merit consideration but should not dictate inaction. The ruthless individual acknowledges fear without surrendering to it. They evaluate the signal, measure its relevance, and then proceed with deliberate movement. This is not recklessness, it is calculated courage, grounded in the principles of clarity and ethical awareness. Decisive action is amplified by prioritization. Not every task, opportunity, or decision deserves the same level of intensity. Ruthlessness is about energy allocation, focusing your effort where it yields the highest return and disengaging from distractions that dilute your impact. Imagine a chessboard with dozens of potential moves. The inexperienced player reacts to every threat. The ruthless player sees the few moves that matter, commits fully, and executes with confidence. Prioritization turns action into leverage, multiplying results without multiplying effort. An essential skill here is anticipatory thinking. The unapologetically ruthless do not merely react, they anticipate. They study patterns, identify leverage points, and prepare for probable outcomes. This does not mean predicting the future. It means understanding probabilities and positioning yourself to respond effectively. Anticipatory thinking allows you to act decisively under pressure, because preparation creates clarity even in chaos. Equally critical is the ability to embrace calculated risk. Decisive action often involves stepping into the unknown. Hesitation stems from a desire to avoid loss, but in many cases the cost of inaction is higher than the cost of risk. The ruthless individual evaluates risk logically, considering both probability and potential impact, and then chooses the path most aligned with their objectives. Risk becomes a tool, not a barrier. Let's examine a real-world scenario, a professional opportunity that could advance your career, but requires a bold proposal, public visibility, and temporary discomfort. The hesitant mind will overanalyze, weighing what-ifs and possible judgments. The ruthless mind will analyze the probability of success, prepare thoroughly, and act decisively. They accept that discomfort is inevitable, but progress demands it. Execution transforms possibility into reality. Hesitation leaves potential unrealized. Action without reflection is reckless. Decisive action demands feedback loops. Every step you take must be measured, evaluated, and adjusted based on results. Ruthlessness does not equate to blind persistence. It equates to disciplined persistence. You act, observe outcomes, refine your approach, and act again. This iterative process increases accuracy over time while sustaining momentum and control. More of the difference between stagnation and progress is often the quality of this feedback loop. Another layer is ethical alignment. decisive action does not excuse compromise. The unapologetically ruthless act decisively while respecting ethical boundaries. They communicate clearly, execute responsibly, and prioritize mutual benefit where possible. Action without ethics is short-lived. Decisions made without integrity may yield immediate results, but they erode credibility, trust, and long-term influence. Ruthlessness is sustainable precisely because it integrates ethics, maintaining power without sacrificing principle. A subtle but profound aspect of decisive action is timing. Many opportunities are lost not due to lack of skill or insight, but due to delay. Ruthless timing is not impulsive, it is informed. It involves observing conditions and understanding the rhythms of human behavior and striking when the probability of effective impact is highest. Timing amplifies the power of action. It transforms good decisions into transformative outcomes. Communication is another critical element. Decisive action is rarely solitary. It often involves influencing others, securing resources, or guiding a team. Ruthless action requires clarity of communication. Your intent, your expectations, and your boundaries must be conveyed with calm authority. Miscommunication breeds friction, slows execution, and invites unnecessary resistance. Ethical ruthlessness ensures that action is aligned, understood, and supported wherever possible. Consider the mental state required. Decisive action thrives on emotional equilibrium. Fear, doubt, or impatience can distort perception and delay movement. Cultivating calm authority allows you to act with precision. You acknowledge the discomfort inherent in high-stakes action, but do not allow it to control you. Your mind becomes a steady platform from which decisions can be executed confidently, consistently, and ethically. Decision fatigue is an obstacle often underestimated. The ruthless mind manages mental energy strategically. Major decisions are prioritized, routine choices are systematized, and trivial distractions are minimized. By conserving cognitive energy for what truly matters, decisive action remains sustainable. This is why planning, reflection, and structured habits are not optional. They are the infrastructure that enables ruthlessness to function effectively. A practical method is the pre-action analysis. Before a significant move, identify the objective, or map the probable outcomes, assess risks, and define your minimum acceptable result. Then commit to execution. This method reduces hesitation, clarifies intent, and strengthens confidence. Each successful application reinforces neural pathways, making decisive action more natural and instinctive over time. Ruthlessness also requires detachment from outcome anxiety. While results are important, the ruthless mind focuses on the quality of execution rather than obsessive attachment to success or failure. Anxiety about results often delays action. Detachment does not mean apathy. It means focusing on controllable variables, executing optimally, and adapting based on feedback. The clarity of focus on action rather than outcome is a hallmark of unapologetic effectiveness. Consider discipline in timing and pace. Many people mistake speed for decisiveness. Action is powerful, but impulsivity undermines sustainability. Ruthlessness balances urgency with deliberation. You move quickly where leverage is high, but you pause strategically to gather insight, align resources, or anticipate challenges. This balance ensures momentum without chaos. Another dimension is resilience under resistance. Decisive action often encounters friction, skepticism, competition, or systemic inertia. The unapologetically ruthless approach these challenges with composed persistence. Resistance is a signal, not a blockade. It is evaluated, addressed, and, if necessary, navigated with ethical assertiveness. Every obstacle becomes an opportunity to refine execution and demonstrate capability. The psychology of commitment is central. Ruthlessness is reinforced by consistent follow-through. An idea, strategy, or plan is only as valuable as its execution. The mind habituates to consistency. Repeated decisive action strengthens confidence, reduces hesitation, and builds a reputation for reliability and effectiveness. Over time, decisiveness becomes an intrinsic part of identity, seamlessly integrated into thought and behavior. Practical exercises for cultivating decisive action include daily prioritization drills, scenario simulations, and outcome reflection. Identify high-impact tasks, plan execution with clarity, and commit to completion. Afterward, reflect objectively. What worked, what was misjudged, and what patterns emerge for future application. Over weeks and months, these exercises internalize the mechanics of ethical ruthlessness. Finally, remember the interplay between self-awareness and action. Ruthlessness is not blind aggression. Every decision should be informed by insight into your strengths, limitations, and patterns of behavior. Self-awareness ensures that action leverages capability, anticipates challenges, and mitigates blind spots. Ethical ruthlessness is adaptive, responsive to reality without losing momentum, principled without being paralyzed by perfectionism. By mastering decisive action, you transform potential into results. Awareness without action is stagnant. Insight without execution is wasted. Emotion without control is destructive. Ruthlessness integrates all of these dimensions into a coherent system. You act decisively, ethically, and effectively even under uncertainty. The most profound aspect is the internal shift. As decisive action becomes habitual, hesitation diminishes. Fear no longer dictates movement. Comfort no longer dominates choices. You step forward when most are frozen. You allocate effort when most are distracted. You act with precision when most are reactive. The cumulative effect is not just success. It is presence, authority, and influence grounded in ethical power. This section establishes the operational core of ruthlessness. The mind provides clarity, emotion provides focus, ethics provide boundaries, and decisive action converts all of it into impact. Without this operational layer, awareness remains theoretical, insight remains inert, and potential remains unrealized. With it, ruthlessness becomes actionable, practical, and transformative. From here, the next layer expands on ethical influence, negotiation, and interaction, how decisiveness interacts with the social world while maintaining integrity and impact. But for now, internalize this. Decisive action is not impulsive. It is deliberate, not aggressive. It is focused, not reactive. It is unapologetically effective. The bridge between thought and result is built on movement, on execution, on courage tempered with strategy. Master this, and the architecture of ruthlessness begins to manifest not as a theory, but as lived reality. The mind is prepared, the emotions are regulated, the boundaries are clear, and the next step, action, is executed without hesitation. Ethical influence and strategic presence. Ruthlessness is not exercised in isolation. The world is interconnected and influence. The ability to move situations, people, and all circumstances in alignment with your objectives is an essential component of unapologetic effectiveness. But influence, when wielded without principle, becomes manipulation. Ethical influence is the bridge between decisiveness and sustainable impact. It allows you to shape outcomes without compromising integrity, respect, or fairness. The first principle of ethical influence is presence. Presence is more than being physically in a space. It is the embodiment of clarity, calm authority, and purpose. When you are fully present, others perceive decisiveness and confidence. They sense someone who acts intentionally, evaluates with insight, and communicates without ambiguity. This presence creates a subtle gravitational effect. People listen, they respond, and alignment becomes easier, not because you coerce, but because your clarity, invites cooperation. Presence is rooted in internal calm. Anxiety, over-explanation, or overcompensation disrupts influence. Ruthlessness, ethically applied, requires emotional equilibrium. When your energy is steady, your words deliberate, and your focus unshakable, influence becomes natural. It is no longer an act, it is an extension of who you are. People do not resist presence grounded in authority tempered by respect. They respond to it. Next comes clarity of communication. Ruthlessness does not benefit from ambiguity or hidden agendas. Ethical influence requires transparency in intent, expectations, and boundaries. When you communicate clearly, you reduce friction, prevent misinterpretation, and create alignment. People are more willing to act when they understand what is expected, why it matters, and how they fit into the broader objective. This does not mean sharing every detail. Discernment is still required, but it does mean articulating priorities without hesitation or apology. Influence is amplified by understanding human behavior. This is not manipulation, it is insight. People respond predictably to certain stimuli, incentives, and constraints. By observing tendencies and patterns, you can anticipate reactions, identify leverage points, and shape interactions ethically. This understanding allows you to communicate more effectively, delegate strategically, and create conditions for collaboration rather than confrontation. The ruthless mind uses this knowledge not to exploit, but to align, clarify, and optimize outcomes. A practical example is a high-stakes team project. Decisions must be made, deadlines met, and resources managed. The unapologetically ruthless leader, grounded in ethical influence, does not dominate or intimidate. They establish presence, communicate expectations clearly, and understand the individual strengths and tendencies of each team member. They delegate effectively, anticipate challenges, and maintain momentum. Influence emerges naturally because it is supported by competence, clarity, and integrity, not coercion. Another key principle is boundary projection. Ethical influence is impossible without clearly defined limits. People unconsciously test boundaries. Hesitation or inconsistency invites compromise. Ruthlessness requires setting and maintaining boundaries unapologetically. This does not mean rigidity or hostility. It means clear, consistent signals about what is acceptable, prioritized, and actionable. Key boundaries create trust by reducing ambiguity and ensuring that interaction remains focused and respectful. The unapologetically ruthless also master timing in influence. Communication, persuasion, and engagement are most effective when aligned with context, readiness, and leverage. Acting too early or too late diminishes impact. Observing context and choosing the optimal moment to communicate or execute a strategy amplifies outcomes. Timing, like action, is not impulsive. It is deliberate, informed by observation and insight. Ethical influence is further strengthened by reciprocity and mutual benefit. Attempts to coerce or dominate erode trust and sustainability. Influence grounded in mutual respect and aligned interest increases the likelihood of cooperation. When others perceive that their participation advances their objectives as well as yours, alignment becomes natural. Ruthlessness is not zero-sum. It is about creating leverage that respects the agency and value of others while achieving your goals. A subtle but critical skill is non-verbal communication. Your posture, tone, eye contact, and movement convey authority and decisiveness even when words are minimal. The unapologetically ruthless individual understands that presence extends beyond speech. Non-verbal cues influence perception, reinforce clarity, and create psychological space for effective engagement. This is why calmness, poise, and measured pacing matter. They transmit confidence and control without aggression. Negotiation is a key domain of influence. Ethical negotiation requires preparation, understanding, and strategic patience. The ruthless negotiator identifies objectives, anticipates counterpoints, and communicates value without deception. They prioritize alignment over domination and leverage clarity over coercion. Success in negotiation emerges not from overpowering others, but from guiding interactions toward mutually beneficial outcomes. This approach strengthens trust, preserves relationships, and amplifies long-term influence. Listening is equally vital. Influence is a two-way process. Observing reactions, hearing concerns, and adapting ethically enhances alignment. Listening is not passive, it is an active component of decisiveness. It informs timing, calibrates communication, and reveals patterns that allow you to act strategically while respecting others' perspectives. Ethical ruthlessness thrives on awareness, not force. A practical approach to ethical influence includes preparation, clarity, presence, and observation. Before engaging in a discussion, negotiation, or presentation, clarify your objectives, anticipate probable outcomes, identify leverage points, and prepare communication strategically. During engagement, maintain presence, communicate clearly, and observe responses without attachment. Afterward, reflect objectively. Which actions created alignment? Where did friction emerge? What adjustments optimize future influence? This cycle internalizes the mechanics of ethical impact. The unapologetically ruthless also understand psychological pacing. Influence is rarely a single, decisive moment. Most outcomes unfold over sequences of interaction. Calibrating pacing, when to push, when to pause, when to reinforce, creates rhythm, reduces resistance, and increases effectiveness. Pacing is informed by awareness and refined through feedback, allowing influence to flow naturally rather than forcefully. Equally important is adaptability. Ethical influence requires the ability to pivot when circumstances shift or new information emerges. The ruthless individual does not cling to rigid scripts or plans. They adapt strategically while maintaining integrity. Flexibility ensures responsiveness, maximizes opportunity, and prevents wasted energy on unproductive pathways. Another dimension is emotional influence. People respond not just to facts or logic, but to tone, energy, and intent. Calm authority, ethical assertiveness, and measured intensity create a psychological climate conducive to alignment. The unapologetically ruthless use emotional intelligence not to manipulate, but to regulate interactions, sustain focus, and reinforce presence. Emotional influence amplifies clarity and decision-making without compromising ethics. Consider the subtle interplay of power and restraint. Influence is strongest when it is applied judiciously. Overexertion breeds resistance, underexertion diminishes authority. Ethical ruthlessness balances the application of influence, understanding that measured intervention achieves more than constant pressure. The ability to act decisively, then observe, then adjust, is the hallmark of strategic impact. Reflection is critical. After key interactions, evaluate: did my influence align with my objectives? Did I maintain ethical boundaries? Did I communicate with clarity and presence? Did I adapt effectively? These reflections refine both strategy and internal discipline, reinforcing habits that sustain unapologetic ruthlessness. A profound insight emerges: influence without self-mastery is fragile. Presence, clarity, and ethical alignment must originate internally. The external effect is merely a reflection of internal structure. The unapologetically ruthless invest in self-awareness, emotional regulation, and disciplined preparation because these foundations determine how effectively influence manifests. Ethical influence also intersects with network leverage. Connections, relationships, and alliances amplify capability. The ruthless mind recognizes which relationships matter, invests in alignment, and disengages where collaboration is unproductive or misaligned. Influence extends beyond individual action when relationships are cultivated with clarity, respect, and strategic alignment. Finally, you'd understand that ruthless influence is incremental. It builds over time through consistency, presence, and repeated demonstration of competence and integrity. Sudden attempts at dominance are rarely sustainable. Deliberate, ethical, and consistent influence creates enduring power, credibility, and opportunity. Incremental influence fosters trust, reinforces boundaries, and allows decisiveness to operate at scale. By mastering ethical influence and strategic presence, ruthlessness becomes not just an internal capability, but an operational force. Your decisions, actions, and objectives extend outward, creating impact that is aligned, principled, and effective. Presence generates respect. Clarity generates alignment. Boundaries generate predictability. Ethical leverage generates opportunity. It all combine to ensure that decisive action achieves maximum effect without compromise. This layer transforms ruthlessness from individual capability into functional leadership. It demonstrates that unapologetic effectiveness is not about coercion or fear. It is about alignment, communication, and responsible execution. The more you integrate ethical influence into your framework, the more sustainable and impactful your ruthlessness becomes. The next sections will explore advanced execution in high-stakes environments, navigating conflict, and expanding your impact. But at this stage, internalize this. Ethical influence is the outward expression of internal mastery. It allows decisiveness to extend beyond yourself, creating measurable results while maintaining integrity, respect, and control. Ruthlessness, ethically applied, is a system. Your presence, clarity, emotional regulation, communication, boundaries, timing, pacing, and adaptability converge to produce influence that is effective, principled, and lasting. By mastering this system, you do not just act decisively, you shape circumstances, align collaboration, and amplify results in ways that are unapologetic, strategic, and sustainable. Mastering high-stakes execution. Ruthlessness reaches its full expression in high-stakes situations. It is easy to appear decisive when the environment is calm and predictable. The true measure of unapologetic ruthlessness emerges when pressure intensifies, stakes rise, and consequences expand. High-stakes execution is where clarity, discipline, and ethical precision converge. It is where the inner architecture of ruthlessness is tested and proven. The first principle in high-stakes execution is mental preparation. The mind must operate as a steady platform, unshaken by fear, distraction, or the weight of expectations. Many people freeze or react emotionally when stakes rise because their mental framework is untrained for pressure. The unapologetically ruthless cultivate cognitive resilience through deliberate practice, scenario simulations, contingency planning, and repeated exposure to discomfort. The mind, like a muscle, strengthens through repetition and controlled challenge. Pressure often magnifies minor weaknesses. Hesitation, poor focus, unclear priorities. These flaws that remain hidden in calm environments become critical liabilities under stress. Ruthlessness is the capacity to identify and correct these weaknesses preemptively. Awareness, emotional regulation, i.e. and decisive action are not optional, they are essential. Each element reinforces the others. Clarity informs focus. Focus guides action. Action generates results. Results reinforce confidence. The system becomes self-sustaining. A core tenet of high-stakes execution is scenario mapping. Before engaging in any significant challenge, map probable pathways. Consider contingencies, resources, and potential obstacles. Identify leverage points where intervention produces the highest impact. This is not about predicting the future. It is about probability and preparation. Anticipation reduces reactive chaos, allowing decisive action to flow naturally even under uncertainty. Timing in high-stakes contexts becomes magnified. Hesitation can transform opportunity into regret. Ruthlessness requires sensitivity to timing, not impulsivity, but informed urgency. The right action at the wrong time is often less effective than decisive action aligned with context. Observing patterns, anticipating responses, and aligning execution with optimal windows amplifies outcomes without resorting to coercion or overreach. Decision-making under pressure also requires emotional compartmentalization. Anxiety, frustration, or distraction can distort judgment. The unapologetically ruthless recognize emotions as information, not as directives. They acknowledge fear or doubt, assess its relevance, and then act with disciplined focus. Emotional control is not suppression, it is strategic regulation. It ensures clarity and precision when every choice carries weight. High-stakes execution also demands resource mastery. Your energy, time, skills, and connections are finite. Under pressure, or the cost of misallocation increases dramatically. The ruthless mind evaluates where effort produces the greatest leverage and allocates resources accordingly. Friction is minimized, redundancy is planned, execution is efficient, deliberate, and sustainable. This level of strategic resource allocation distinguishes high performers from reactive participants. Another essential principle is ethical decisiveness in uncertainty. The stakes are high precisely because outcomes are uncertain. Acting decisively under uncertainty does not excuse unethical shortcuts. On the contrary, the higher the stakes, the more crucial integrity becomes. Ethical decisiveness means making choices with confidence while maintaining respect, fairness, and accountability. It preserves long-term influence even when short-term pressure is intense. But the role of observation and feedback is magnified in high-stakes situations. The environment evolves rapidly. Stakeholders react unpredictably. Continuous observation allows adaptation without compromising purpose or ethics. Feedback loops, monitoring results, interpreting signals, adjusting strategies, ensure that action remains aligned with objectives and responsive to emergent challenges. Ruthlessness thrives not on rigidity, but on disciplined flexibility. A subtle but critical skill is strategic communication under pressure. Clarity becomes paramount. Ambiguity, hesitation, or over-explanation magnifies uncertainty and slows execution. The unapologetically ruthless communicate expectations, boundaries, and intentions with calm authority. Words are precise, timing is deliberate, and presence reinforces intent. High communication amplifies action, aligns participants, and stabilizes high-stakes environments. Consider conflict management in these scenarios. High stakes often provoke tension, competition, or disagreement. Ruthlessness is not about aggression. It is about resolute negotiation and principled alignment. Conflicts are assessed objectively. What must be resolved, what can be deferred, and what should be reframed. Ethical ruthlessness addresses disagreement with clarity, asserts boundaries without hostility, and guides resolution toward mutual understanding or acceptable compromise. The outcome preserves integrity and advances objectives. The unapologetically ruthless also practice stress habituation. Exposure to pressure is a tool. Repeated engagement with high-stakes contexts strengthens cognitive resilience, emotional control, and decision-making speed. Over time, situations that once triggered hesitation become opportunities for effective action. This is a cumulative advantage. Each high-stakes challenge reinforces the internal architecture of ruthlessness. Another critical layer is risk calibration. High stakes inherently involve risk. Hesitation arises from fear of loss. Recklessness emerges from overconfidence. Ruthlessness lies between these extremes, measured evaluation of probability, impact, and strategic leverage. Risks are assessed, mitigated, and embraced only when aligned with objective advantage. This rational approach prevents reactive panic while enabling bold, ethical action. Execution in high-stakes environments is also shaped by pattern recognition under complexity. Observing recurring dynamics, human behavior, organizational tendencies, or environmental signals allows anticipation of challenges and opportunities. Pattern recognition does not equate to prediction. It enhances probabilistic understanding. This insight enables faster, more confident, and more precise action, increasing the likelihood of favorable outcomes while maintaining ethical boundaries. High-stakes ruthlessness also demands energy management. Mental, emotional, and physical reserves are finite. Fatigue, distraction, or depletion undermines judgment and response time. The unapologetically ruthless manage energy proactively. Structured focus, prioritized tasks, restorative practices, and deliberate pacing. Energy conservation enhances resilience, sustains momentum, and prevents costly mistakes under pressure. A practical method for high-stakes execution is the three-layer preparation system. Strategic layer: define objectives, identify leverage points, and map probable scenarios. Operational layer: allocate resources, define execution steps, and establish contingency plans. Psychological layer: cultivate emotional regulation, mental focus, and stress habituation. This system integrates clarity, preparation, and resilience. It transforms uncertainty into calculated opportunity and ensures that action remains deliberate, ethical, and effective. Reflection: post-execution is equally important. Each high-stakes engagement should be analyzed. Where was decisiveness effective? Where did timing falter? Which decisions maintained integrity and which required adjustment? Reflection strengthens future performance, refines judgment, and reinforces the internal framework that sustains unapologetic ruthlessness. High-stakes execution also intersects with collaboration leverage. Complex environments rarely require solitary action. The ruthless mind identifies partners, allies, and teams whose capabilities align with objectives. Collaboration is orchestrated ethically, responsibilities are clear, boundaries maintained, and mutual benefit emphasized. Influence, when amplified through principled collaboration, increases the probability of success without compromising integrity. Finally, high-stakes ruthlessness is reinforced by incremental mastery. Each challenge, however small, builds resilience, sharpens focus, and reinforces decisiveness. The mind internalizes patterns of action, the body habituates to pressure, and the identity strengthens around capability rather than fear. Over time, high-stakes situations become opportunities rather than threats, a platform for ethical impact and unapologetic execution. By mastering high-stakes execution, ruthlessness evolves from potential to applied power. Awareness, clarity, emotional control, and ethical influence converge under pressure. Decisive action becomes instinctive, presence becomes authoritative, and outcomes reflect intentional mastery rather than reactive chance. The unapologetically ruthless operate not from panic, impulse, or aggression, but from disciplined preparation, strategic insight, and ethical resolve. At this stage, the internal and operational layers of ruthlessness are integrated. You are aware, emotionally controlled, decisively active, ethically influential, and capable under pressure. The framework is functional, the mind is sharp, the body and energy are optimized. Presence commands alignment. Execution transforms intention into measurable impact. This is the domain of the unapologetically ruthless, calm under chaos, clear under pressure, ethical under complexity, and decisive when stakes are highest. Mastery here is both a skill and an identity. The mind, body, and actions are aligned. Hesitation is minimized, energy is directed, influence is ethical, yet potent. Execution is deliberate, precise, and resilient. The next sections will explore navigating conflict, expanding influence in complex networks, and sustaining unapologetic ruthlessness over the long term. But at this juncture, I internalize this. Ruthlessness under pressure is not about aggression or domination. It is about integration, resilience, and applied capability. Every principle converges to ensure action is effective, ethical, and enduring, navigating conflict and resistance. Ruthlessness is tested not in comfort, but in conflict. High-stakes decisions, ambitious objectives, and unapologetic action inevitably generate resistance, sometimes overt, sometimes subtle. How you navigate conflict determines whether your ruthlessness is sustainable and effective, or whether it fractures under pressure. Ethical, unapologetic ruthlessness thrives not by avoidance, but by disciplined engagement. The first principle in conflict is perception control, not in a manipulative sense, but in clarity of self-presentation. When stakes rise, emotions intensify. Confusion, ambiguity, or overreaction magnifies resistance. The unapologetically ruthless maintain calm authority. They project clarity and purpose, ensuring that their intentions are understood without aggression. Others may resist, but clear perception reduces misinterpretation and unnecessary friction. Presence becomes a stabilizing force in turbulent situations. Conflict often triggers emotional reactivity. Most people respond to disagreement with defensiveness, frustration, or appeasement. Ruthlessness requires emotional insulation, the ability to acknowledge tension without succumbing to it. Emotions are observed, processed, and compartmentalized. This does not mean suppression, it means strategic control. By regulating responses, you maintain credibility, preserve ethical integrity, say and act in alignment with your objectives rather than reacting impulsively to provocation. A second principle is interest-based engagement. Ethical ruthlessness recognizes that resistance often arises from misalignment of goals, incentives, or expectations. Conflicts are reframed not as personal battles, but as intersections of differing priorities. By identifying underlying interests, you can address objections, clarify intent, and redirect energy toward mutually constructive outcomes. This approach transforms potential confrontation into strategic negotiation. Timing, once again, is critical. Many conflicts escalate because responses are mistimed. The unapologetically ruthless understand when to engage immediately, when to pause, and when to gather more information. Premature confrontation may inflame resistance, while delayed action may allow a problem to solidify. Strategic timing balances urgency with observation, ensuring interventions are impactful, measured, and ethical. Another core skill is assertive boundary enforcement. Ruthlessness demands clarity regarding what is acceptable and what is not. Boundaries reduce ambiguity, signal priorities, and preserve focus. In conflict, boundaries are communicated with calm authority, decisively without aggression. This establishes control over your domain while maintaining ethical standards. People respect limits when they are consistent, principled, and applied without hostility. Listening is a tool of influence, particularly in conflict. Many underestimate the power of observation. By carefully listening to objections, concerns, and motivations, you gain insight into probable outcomes and potential leverage points. Ethical ruthlessness uses listening not to manipulate, but to inform strategy, refine communication, and identify pathways for resolution. Awareness in these moments is a tactical advantage. Negotiation is inseparable from conflict. The unapologetically ruthless approach negotiation with strategic clarity. They understand objectives, constraints, and probable responses. They communicate expectations clearly, anticipate resistance, and prioritize ethical alignment. The goal is not domination, it is resolution that preserves integrity while advancing outcomes. Negotiation is a force multiplier when executed with disciplined, principled precision. A subtle psychological tool in conflict management is reframing. A resistance often arises from perception rather than substance. By reframing the situation ethically, you can shift attention from opposition to collaboration. This may involve clarifying misconceptions, highlighting shared goals, or demonstrating the practical benefits of alignment. Reframing is not deception, it is perspective adjustment, applied responsibly to reduce friction and guide outcomes. Another dimension is calculated patience. Not all conflicts require immediate resolution. The unapologetically ruthless understand the value of waiting for optimal conditions. When emotions cool, information clarifies or leverage increases. Patience is not indecision, it is strategic timing. Acting too early often undermines influence, while acting at the right moment maximizes impact and preserves ethical authority. Conflict also tests resilience under scrutiny. When stakes are high, decisions attract evaluation, criticism, and skepticism. The ruthless individual maintains focus on purpose rather than reaction to judgment. They internalize accountability, reflect objectively, and adjust as necessary without abandoning principles. Resilience ensures that criticism does not paralyze action or compromise ethical standards. A practical approach to conflict management integrates several layers. Assessment. Identify the source, scope, and stakes of resistance. Determine what is controllable versus what must be influenced. Preparation. Clarify objectives, anticipate responses, and define boundaries. Engagement. Act decisively, communicate clearly, and observe reactions. Adjustment. Reflect, recalibrate, and continue action while maintaining ethical standards. High-stakes conflict often involves groups, teams, or networks. Ethical ruthlessness extends here through strategic alignment. Rather than attempting to dominate, focus on creating clarity, establishing consistent expectations, and reinforcing shared objectives. Alignment reduces friction, enables decisive action, and ensures momentum persists even in complex social structures. The unapologetically ruthless also practice internal narrative control. In conflict, it is easy to spiral into self-doubt, fear, or defensiveness. Your internal dialogue shapes your external presence. By cultivating confidence grounded in preparation, ethical clarity, and past successes, you maintain composure. The mind becomes a stabilizing force rather than a source of hesitation or overreaction. Another principle is adaptive leverage application. Resistance is not uniform. Some objections require assertive resolution. Others benefit from subtle persuasion or patience. The ruthless individual calibrates response intensity based on context, ethical boundaries, and probable impact. This ensures that action is efficient, effective, and principled, maximizing outcomes without unnecessary confrontation. Observation also extends to pattern recognition in behavior. Resistance often follows predictable patterns influenced by stress, bias, or competing priorities. Recognizing these patterns allows preemptive intervention, measured response, and strategic influence. The ruthless mind applies observation ethically, anticipating challenges to guide outcomes, not to exploit or deceive. High-stakes conflict frequently intersects with ethical compromise management. In complex situations, some concessions may be necessary. The unapologetically ruthless assess trade-offs carefully, prioritizing integrity and long-term objectives over short-term gain. Strategic compromise preserves credibility, maintains alignment, and enables sustained action. Ruthlessness does not mean rigidity. It means principled adaptability. Emotional intelligence is indispensable. The ability to recognize, interpret, and respond to others' emotional cues allows negotiation, alignment, and resolution without aggression. Ethical ruthlessness combines cognitive clarity with emotional sensitivity, ensuring that interactions remain effective, principled, and sustainable. Emotional intelligence transforms potential friction into actionable insight. A practical method to navigate conflict involves a 4-step cycle: observation, listen, evaluate, and gather data. Reflection: clarify objectives, boundaries, and ethical parameters. Action: respond decisively, communicate clearly, and implement strategy. Feedback: assess outcomes, adjust, and reinforce patterns of success. This cycle ensures that conflict becomes a mechanism for learning, influence, and momentum rather than disruption. It embeds ruthlessness within a framework of ethical action, preserving both efficacy and integrity. Conflict also reveals opportunities for reputation building. How you navigate resistance communicates capability, composure, and reliability. The unapologetically ruthless leverage conflict to demonstrate competence, ethical consistency, and decisiveness. What each high-stakes engagement reinforces credibility, amplifies influence, and strengthens alignment with objectives. Finally, understand that sustainable ruthlessness requires cumulative experience. Each encounter with conflict, resistance, or pressure is an opportunity to refine judgment, sharpen decisiveness, and enhance ethical influence. Over time, you internalize patterns of behavior, reinforce mental resilience, and build an identity grounded in unapologetic, principled action. By mastering conflict navigation, ruthlessness becomes robust rather than brittle. You act decisively, maintain ethical standards, and influence outcomes even under tension. Presence, clarity, emotional regulation, boundary enforcement, observation, and adaptive action converge to create a system where resistance strengthens rather than weakens performance. Why in the Unapologetically Ruthless understand a critical truth: conflict is inevitable, but paralysis is optional. Ethical engagement transforms opposition into alignment, friction into insight, and resistance into leverage. Mastery here ensures that ruthlessness is sustainable, principled, and effective, not reactive, manipulative, or destructive. At this stage, the internal, operational, social, and high-stakes layers of ruthlessness are integrated. Awareness, decisive action, ethical influence, high-stakes execution, and conflict navigation form a cohesive framework. The mind is clear, the presence commanding, the execution disciplined, and the response adaptive. The final section will explore long-term sustainability, legacy, and the integration of unapologetic ruthlessness into a lifetime of achievement. But for now, internalize this. Conflict is a proving ground. It reveals the strength of preparation, clarity, and ethical resolve. It tests presence, discipline, and adaptability. By navigating it effectively, ruthlessness becomes both actionable and enduring, preparing you for the complex challenges that define lasting influence. Sustaining unapologetic ruthlessness. Ruthlessness is not a fleeting skill or a temporary posture. It is a long-term practice, a cultivated identity, and a mindset that persists across circumstances, challenges, and life stages. Most people fail not in the application of ruthlessness, but in sustaining it. They burn bright for a moment, then fade under pressure, distraction, or ethical compromise. Unapologetic ruthlessness, ethically applied, endures because it is built on structure, reflection, and continual refinement. The first pillar of sustainability is ritualized discipline. Daily habits, structured reflection, and deliberate focus form the backbone of lasting ruthlessness. Discipline is not restriction, it is liberation. It ensures that clarity, emotional control, decisiveness, and ethical influence are not occasional achievements, but default modes of operation. Small, consistent actions compound, reinforcing neural pathways that make disciplined ruthlessness habitual rather than forced. A practical application of ritualized discipline is daily reflection and planning. Each morning, review objectives, priorities, and probable challenges. Each evening, reflect on decisions, actions, and results. Assess alignment with ethical standards, personal accountability, and effectiveness. Over time, this practice cultivates insight, resilience, and clarity, ensuring that ruthlessness remains intentional rather than reactive. The second pillar is continuous learning and adaptation. The unapologetically ruthless recognize that environments, relationships, and personal capacities evolve. What worked yesterday may not work today. The ability to observe, assimilate information, and refine strategies is essential. Adaptation is not opportunism, it is disciplined responsiveness. It ensures that ruthlessness is applied strategically rather than mechanically, maximizing impact while preserving ethical alignment. Energy management becomes increasingly vital over the long term. The mind, body, and focus are finite resources. Sustainability requires calibrated energy allocation. Prioritize high-impact activities, protect attention from low-value distractions, and integrate recovery and restoration. The unapologetically ruthless treat energy as an asset, finite, valuable, and deserving of careful stewardship. Without energy management, decisiveness falters, presence weakens, and ethical clarity diminishes. Another pillar is resilience to setbacks. Even the most disciplined, prepared, and ethical individuals encounter resistance, failure, or unexpected challenges. Ruthlessness is not the absence of failure, it is the capacity to recover, reflect, and act without apology. Resilience emerges from perspective. Challenges are evaluated as data rather than judgment, opportunities for adaptation rather than threats. This mindset transforms adversity into reinforcement of capability. Sustainability also depends on community and alliance awareness. Unapologetic ruthlessness does not require isolation, but it does require discernment. Relationships, networks, and partnerships are maintained ethically, strategically, and selectively. Aligning with capable, principled individuals amplifies leverage and sustains momentum. Conversely, engagement with toxic or misaligned parties drains energy, introduces friction, and undermines consistency. Ethical discernment ensures influence is durable rather than fleeting. A critical aspect of longevity is internal narrative alignment. The stories you tell yourself about purpose, capability, and responsibility shape behavior. Over time, unexamined narratives can erode focus, invite doubt, or justify compromise. The unapologetically ruthless cultivate narratives grounded in self-awareness, ethical clarity, and accountability. When this internal framework sustains confidence, reinforces decisiveness, and preserves alignment between identity and action, high performers recognize the compounding nature of incremental advantage. Each disciplined decision, each ethical choice, each decisive action strengthens capability, influence, and credibility. The process is cumulative. Momentum builds quietly through repeated practice, reflection, and adjustment. Over months and years, what once seemed modest accumulates into transformative capacity. Sustainability relies on acknowledging this compounding effect, resisting the temptation for shortcuts, and committing to long-term mastery. Emotional regulation remains a cornerstone. Over extended periods, pressure, criticism, and complexity intensify. Did the unapologetically ruthless invest continuously in emotional calibration? Practices that maintain clarity, reduce reactive impulses, and sustain ethical composure. Meditation, focused reflection, and deliberate detachment are not indulgences. They are tools to preserve the mental state that enables long-term decisiveness and principled action. strategic rest is equally critical. Ruthlessness is not relentless force, it is precision application of energy. Extended high-intensity effort without restoration leads to cognitive fatigue, impaired judgment, and ethical drift. The unapologetically ruthless integrate recovery cycles, consciously balancing action and reflection. This ensures that clarity, focus, and decisiveness remain intact across prolonged periods of pressure. Another dimension of sustainability is ethical reinforcement. A ruthlessness can erode if unchecked ambition overshadows principle. Continuous reinforcement of ethical standards, clarity, fairness, accountability ensures that power is applied responsibly. Integrity is not static, it is practiced. Each choice, especially under pressure, must be measured against ethical alignment. This deliberate vigilance preserves the credibility and influence that underpin enduring ruthlessness. Sustainable ruthlessness also involves anticipation of complexity. As capability grows, challenges become more multifaceted. Increased influence attracts scrutiny, expectation, and resistance. The unapologetically ruthless recognize that complexity requires preparation, adaptability, and strategic foresight. Anticipation is not about prediction, it is about readiness, flexibility, and calculated positioning, to allowing consistent effectiveness even as stakes and scale increase. A practical approach to long-term mastery involves layered reflection. Micro-level, daily assessment of decisions, energy, and emotional state. Meso-level, weekly evaluation of objectives, progress, and strategic alignment. Macro-level, monthly or quarterly reflection on trajectory, ethical consistency, and cumulative advantage. This structure reinforces clarity, cultivates discipline, and sustains ethical ruthlessness over time. It converts routine practice into strategic advantage, ensuring momentum while preserving composure and principle. Sustaining ruthlessness also requires identity integration. Ruthlessness becomes a characteristic of self, rather than a series of actions performed sporadically. Decisions, priorities, and behaviors align with this identity, by reducing internal conflict, hesitation, and ethical drift. When ruthlessness is internalized, it is expressed naturally, unapologetically, and consistently, regardless of circumstance. The unapologetically ruthless also recognize the importance of strategic influence maintenance. Influence must be cultivated and preserved, not assumed. Relationships, networks, and credibility require ongoing reinforcement through consistent presence, clarity, and ethical action. Neglect erodes alignment. Proactive stewardship ensures leverage is sustainable and principled. Another critical practice is adaptive learning from setbacks. Mistakes, resistance, or unexpected outcomes are inevitable. Ruthlessness is sustained not by avoiding failure, but by systematically extracting insight, adjusting strategy, and maintaining composure. Reflection transforms errors into data for improvement rather than sources of hesitation or self-doubt. Over time, this creates resilience, insight, and enduring capability. A subtle but powerful factor is self-congruence. The alignment between values, identity, and behavior ensures that ruthlessness is sustainable. When decisions, actions, and communication consistently reflect ethical principles and personal priorities, internal friction diminishes. This internal harmony allows ruthlessness to be applied over years without burnout, compromise, or erosion of integrity. Sustainability also requires contextual awareness. Environments evolve, challenges shift. Influence dynamics change. The unapologetically ruthless monitor trends, observe patterns, and adjust strategy ethically. This proactive awareness preserves effectiveness, prevents stagnation, and ensures that decisiveness remains relevant across changing circumstances. Energy, discipline, ethical reinforcement, identity integration, reflection, and strategic adaptation converge to create a system capable of long-term ruthlessness. The unapologetically ruthless are not merely reactive actors, they are architects of their trajectory. Each decision, each boundary, each deliberate action builds cumulative advantage while maintaining alignment with principle. Consider the psychological landscape. Sustainability is not maintained through force alone, but through internalized mastery. The mind, trained through reflection, preparation, and ethical practice, naturally responds with clarity and decisiveness. Habits become systems, decisions become instinctive, while ruthlessness evolves from a conscious effort into an integrated aspect of identity, functioning consistently under pressure and across life stages. The final insight is the compounding effect of long-term consistency. Ethical ruthlessness applied consistently multiplies influence, opportunity, and capability. Each executed decision, aligned action, and principled negotiation reinforces the architecture of ruthlessness. Over time, momentum becomes exponential, outcomes grow, reputation strengthens, and authority solidifies. What begins as practice evolves into legacy. By mastering sustainability, ruthlessness is no longer episodic or situational, it becomes enduring. Daily practice, energy management, ethical reinforcement, reflection, and adaptive learning ensure that decisiveness, clarity, and influence remain sharp across years and challenges. The unapologetically ruthless operate with long-term perspective, balancing intensity with recovery, ambition with ethics, and decisiveness with reflection. Sustainable ruthlessness is the culmination of all prior layers: mental architecture, decisive action, ethical influence, high-stakes execution, and conflict navigation. Each component reinforces the others. Awareness fuels decisiveness. Emotional regulation strengthens presence. Ethical influence guides engagement. High-stakes execution tests resilience. Conflict navigation refines adaptability. Sustainability ensures continuity, compounding, and legacy. Internalize this. Unapologetic ruthlessness is not aggression. It is not exploitation. It is a disciplined system that converts clarity, focus, and ethical action into sustained influence and achievement. When integrated fully, it becomes resilient, principled, and effective across any domain, circumstance, or challenge. It is calm yet commanding, decisive yet reflective, powerful yet ethical. At this stage, the journey is complete. The foundation, operation, social application, high-stakes testing, conflict navigation, and sustainability layers of ruthlessness are fully integrated. The unapologetically ruthless are prepared not just for immediate impact, but for enduring effectiveness, principled influence, and long-term mastery. The architecture of unapologetic ruthlessness. You have now traversed the full framework of unapologetic ruthlessness: awareness, decisive action, ethical influence, high-stakes execution, conflict navigation, and sustainability, all layers integrated into a cohesive system. But the final step is more than technique or strategy. It is a matter of identity, perspective, and purpose. The outer world reflects the inner architecture. The unapologetically ruthless are not defined solely by what they do, but by how they consistently operate, even under pressure, uncertainty, and scrutiny. Reflect on what you have absorbed. Ruthlessness is not aggression. It is not manipulation. It is not dominance for its own sake. It is discipline applied ethically, clarity applied strategically, and action applied decisively. It is presence that commands alignment, not fear. It is influence that inspires cooperation, not submission. It is resilience that transforms setbacks into insight, not excuses. And it is sustainability that ensures impact endures, not fades. Internalize this. Each layer you have mastered forms a pillar of your ongoing development. Awareness creates perception clarity. Decisiveness transforms thought into reality. Ethical influence multiplies impact. High-stakes execution proves capability. Conflict navigation refines adaptability. And sustainability converts practice into habit, habit into identity, and identity into enduring legacy. Every choice, every action, every reflection reinforces this structure. Now consider the psychological transformation. At first, ruthlessness may feel tactical, something applied consciously in discrete situations. Over time, through deliberate practice, it becomes instinctive. Hesitation diminishes, observation sharpens, decisions align with objectives and ethical standards automatically. You operate from a position of calm authority rather than reaction. Influence flows naturally, execution is precise, conflict is navigated with composure. Sustainability is inherent. The mind, body, and presence are unified. Ruthlessness is internalized. This internalization does not produce arrogance, hostility, or entitlement. On the contrary, it fosters humility anchored in competence. You recognize the probabilistic nature of outcomes, the limits of control, and the necessity of reflection. You respect the autonomy and dignity of others, even as you act decisively to pursue objectives. This is unapologetic ruthlessness, bold, principled, and self-consistent. It thrives within clarity, restraint, and integrity. There is a subtle psychological payoff. As ruthlessness is integrated, friction diminishes. The indecision no longer undermines momentum. Emotional volatility no longer distorts judgment. External resistance becomes a measured variable rather than a threat. Complexity is assessed rather than feared. High stakes are embraced rather than avoided. And each action grounded in awareness and ethics compounds into capability and influence. You become, in effect, a force of clarity in a world often defined by hesitation and uncertainty. The practical implications are profound. Decisions that once felt overwhelming are approached with calm authority. Opportunities that once seemed elusive are evaluated with probabilistic clarity. Relationships and networks are navigated with strategic alignment. Challenges and conflicts are addressed with ethical resilience. High-stakes environments are managed with preparation, focus, and precision. Momentum, credibility, and influence are maintained over time, creating sustainable advantage. Yet, even as this framework solidifies, remember, ruthlessness is never static. Situations evolve, stakes fluctuate, and complexity increases. Sustaining effectiveness requires ongoing practice, reflection, and adaptation. The unapologetically ruthless cultivate lifelong habits of observation, assessment, and refinement. They integrate new insights, test assumptions, and adjust strategies while maintaining ethical boundaries. Ruthlessness becomes a dynamic system continuously tuned to the demands of reality. The ultimate measure of unapologetic ruthlessness is not the immediate outcome, nor the temporary advantage. It is consistency under pressure, integrity in execution, and the capacity to convert clarity into sustained impact. It is the ability to act decisively when others hesitate, to influence ethically when others manipulate, to navigate complexity when others are paralyzed, and to persist strategically when others are distracted. This is power grounded in principle. This is mastery without compromise. As you move forward, cultivate these principles in every domain of life. Observe your decisions. Are they guided by clarity, aligned with purpose, and applied ethically? Reflect on your actions. Do they demonstrate presence, influence, and decisiveness without coercion or compromise? Sustain your energy, refine your habits, and prioritize long-term capability over short-term advantage. In doing so, ruthlessness is not a trait you display, it is the architecture of your approach to life itself. Remember, unapologetic ruthlessness is also about responsibility. The more capable and influential you become, the more the outcomes of your decisions ripple outward. Ethical ruthlessness recognizes the weight of impact. It respects consequence while maintaining decisiveness. It navigates complexity without abandoning principle. It amplifies influence without eroding trust. And it balances ambition with accountability. This is what allows ruthlessness to endure, evolve, and contribute meaningfully to any environment or endeavor. The final insight is subtle but essential. Identity shapes action. Ruthlessness is most powerful when it is internalized as part of who you are, rather than something you turn on situationally. When awareness, decisiveness, ethical influence, high-stakes execution, conflict navigation, and sustainability become embedded in your self-concept, you operate seamlessly. Action flows naturally. Decisions are measured yet bold. Presence is calm yet commanding. Influence is principled yet potent. And resilience becomes instinctive rather than effortful. Identity and capability converge. This is unapologetic, sustainable mastery. Take a moment to visualize this. Imagine yourself operating with unwavering clarity in every decision. Observe the confidence in your presence, the ethical precision in your influence, the decisiveness under pressure, the calm navigation of conflict, and the sustainability of your impact over time. Every challenge is approached as an opportunity to apply insight. Every interaction is guided by principle. Every decision contributes to momentum, growth, and alignment with long-term objectives. And this vision is not hypothetical. It is attainable through consistent, deliberate practice. Internalize the rhythm of unapologetic ruthlessness. Awareness identifies patterns and probabilities. Decisive action converts insight into movement. Ethical influence amplifies impact without compromising integrity. High-stakes execution tests and refines resilience. Conflict navigation ensures alignment under pressure. Sustainability maintains capability over the long term. Together, these layers form an integrated system, a blueprint for principled mastery in any domain. Finally, carry this framework forward not as a formula to display, but as an internal architecture to inhabit. Ruthlessness is not about showmanship, dominance, or fear. It is about alignment, capability, and principled influence. It is the internal scaffolding that supports clarity in chaos, decisiveness under uncertainty, and enduring impact without compromise. By living this system consistently, unapologetic ruthlessness becomes not a tactic, but a mode of existence, a way of operating with calm authority, strategic insight, and ethical precision in every dimension of life. This is your foundation. It is now yours to apply, refine, and integrate. Each layer is a tool, each principle a guide, and each habit a reinforcement of identity. The unapologetically ruthless navigate life with focus, integrity, and resilience. They act decisively without apology, influence ethically without coercion, and sustain impact without compromise. They are calm in chaos, steady under pressure, and principled in every engagement. They operate from a position of internal mastery, external clarity, and enduring capability. Embrace this architecture, reinforce it daily, apply it consistently, reflect on it deliberately, and over time, it will not just shape your actions, it will shape the person you become. Unapologetic ruthlessness, ethically applied, is the art of living with clarity, purpose, and resilience. It is not a transient skill, it is a system, a mindset, and a disciplined way of engaging with the world. When integrated fully, it ensures that decisions, actions, and outcomes align with capability, principle, and long-term mastery. It is calm yet commanding, decisive yet reflective, potent yet principled. Step forward, apply these principles. Navigate life with focus, discipline, and ethical ruthlessness. Your presence, your decisions, and your actions will reflect a mind and character built for impact, clarity, and enduring effectiveness. This is unapologetic ruthlessness realized.